Morning, everybody. Very nice to see everybody this morning. This morning is a Downey Peak morning. Lots of good information this morning. This is a Qimen red varietal, and we'll talk all about that. But before we talk about that, we first have to start out with thank yous. Thank you to all of you who sent us the speedy recovery, good energy, get well soon messages during the course of the last couple of weeks. Really appreciate it. I want to take a minute to talk about COVID, not in the way people normally may talk about it, but in the way that we experienced it and what we probably did that was technically wrong that allowed us to succumb to COVID. So remembering that we had come back from Japan, and I think I mentioned Japan is a coffee culture rather than a tea culture. We drank so much less tea there per day. We averaged probably 20 ounces a day, whereas pre-Japan, we averaged about 100 ounces a day. So in a way, we were all teed up every day and have been all this period of time. Japan, we tee down, so to speak, come back, we're tired, we have jet lag, and we didn't right away tee up. And so I think that our immune systems were probably a little less robust than they had been before. So that's from a personal standpoint of how this happened, because it's so weird during this whole period. No colds, no nothing, essentially, until just now. And we know that we've been in areas and exposed to people who've had COVID before, and nothing happened. So that was one of the things we reflected on, and we've gotten ourselves back up to getting all that, getting teed up, so to speak. So we're in good shape with that. And by the way, our cases were very mild, mostly fatigue. Didn't go through the drama and suffering that lots of people go through with COVID. So we feel quite fortunate, actually. So again, thank you for all the energy and the great wishes. Let's go back to Japan for a minute, because there's some things about Japan we've reflected on. Some that, in fact, we've gotten some more information from people in Japan that, in a way, unintentionally reflect some of the stuff that we do here at the tea shop, which is, again, unintentional. So in Japan, when we saw nice things, whether they be nice teas, nice matcha, nice tea tools, we went on this exploration of trying to understand and also trying to purchase some of that to bring back. I think I mentioned before how hard it was to purchase bulk tea leaves. In fact, we failed at that, the stuff that we really wanted, because there's a Japanese intentional philosophy. And that philosophy is the best stuff we don't sell to the outside. We sell small quantities, but we really don't. We're not a wholesale provider. We don't do that, period. Whereas here in the States, there's a kind of a different philosophy. I mean, if somebody came in and said, I want to buy all your heirloom, so long as they didn't say it in the first 30 days that we have the heirloom, okay, that's fine. Because I have confidence that year after year, I'm going to be able to get heirloom, or I might be able to get something equivalent, something interesting for all of you. So this is how we run, and in America generally, I think we tend to run in this direction, and it's just a very different starting point in Japan. We actually hired some people to search for certain types of tea tools that we wanted, excuse me, and weren't able to get ourselves while we were in Japan. And they came back empty. And these people had every incentive to succeed. And they came back empty because in every case they were told, oh no, we don't sell this stuff. That's no problem. Where can I buy it? Oh, you can't. It's made specially for us. And so this is why relationships, we've talked about relationships in China, every bit, if not more so, important in Japan. Cannot move mountains if you haven't built rich relationships. China, and I really feel sorry for people who are trying to enter the tea business today here in America, because it's really hard. It's much harder than it was before. Political considerations have made it that much harder. And just having ability to find the right people to actually make those connections work, it's almost impossible now. So this year, some of you may be wondering, are we going to get new tea? And originally we kind of hinted around before, maybe we won't get new tea this year. Turns out we're wrong. Turns out I was wrong. And my lack of self-control has already started us down the road to getting new tea. So we will have new teas this year, just simply because we can't resist some of the samples where we've already gotten in. So we are excited about that. That wasn't the original plan. And remember, we made the original plan when China and the US and Taiwan were all in the middle of a deep discussion. And part of that discussion was throwing around pieces of metal all over the place. And under those circumstances, doubt crept into our soul. But in these days of relative peace, doubt has left our soul, and now we're thinking again about new stuff. So that's kind of a change in attitude. I know we projected originally that we weren't going to do new teas. Turns out I'm wrong. We are going to do new teas. All right, so let's get down to business. Downey Peaks, member of the Qimen family. Why do I say Qimen instead of Qimen? Qimen is a very specific varietal, and though it is the most famous varietal that's grown within this 2,200 square kilometer area, it is not how the Chinese tea industry usually generally refers to this whole area. In the West, because we see Qimen, we make that sort of reference. In China, they call it Qihun, which, what does Qihun mean? It really means red tea from Qimen County. That's an abbreviation for red tea from Qimen County. So right away, this tells you something. It tells you Qimen County produces more than one type of red tea, because otherwise you just say Qimen needle, you'd be done with it. Westerners would never be confused, and everybody would be happy. Instead, everybody's happy for another reason, because you have different varietals that are showing up on the market. So one of your questions, and I can already feel it forming in your head, is do you have any, and that's us here at Sophie's, do we have anything that's from the Qimen County that is not Qimen needle? And the answer is yes, most definitely. Vortex, Starburst, and Luxuriant Banks, all from the Qimen area. And all of them have a different appearance. Oh, and by the way, of course, Downey Peak. All of them have a different appearance. They are different varietals. Not only that, the other interesting thing is that there is a different process for each one, and more complicated. One of them, particularly Downey Peak, has traditional and then it has innovative, two different processes. The innovative is a process, by the way, what you're getting today is innovative. The innovative is a process that arose during the 1980s. And why did it arise? Did some tea farmer wake up one morning, you know what? I'm feeling innovative this morning. Let's do a different process. So we have to understand Chinese psychology, especially, let's talk about current psychology, and current being really since 1949. So what happened after 1949 was the National Academy of Sciences in China became more directed. And at first, they worked on nuclear projects, and they worked on projects that were going to help the country grow. And then the smaller departments began to get responsibilities related to agriculture, related to the geography of China, and it blossomed. And so change was really heavily driven after 1979. What happened in 1979? Deng Xiaoping came to power and said, essentially said, without using the way I'm paraphrasing it, hey, do anything that brings success to China. He didn't quite phrase it that way. He phrased it something with a cat and a black cat and a white cat. So long as they catch rats, they're a good cat. And really, the message was, let's get out of our old thinking. Let's do what's going to promote livelihood of people in China, promote the growth of China, and make China a true blossoming world power. Now, it took a number of years to blossom into that, but he set the tenure starting in 1979, because he looked around and he said, all right, let's be honest with ourselves. We are not truly a world power yet. We want to get there. And we have to do things, including be honest with ourselves about where we are. National Academy of Sciences then got an assignment, two assignments. One is capture intangible cultural assets. What's the difference between a tangible cultural asset and an intangible one from the Chinese perspective? Tangible, you go to Xi'an, you see all these terracotta warriors. Hey, I can feel that. I can feel it with my hand and in my heart. Intangible, the process of making tea. If that goes away, that's an important heritage or cultural asset that leaves China. And so the National Academy of Sciences took this very seriously and really recorded as many of the processes as they could. And they're still in the process of looking for those types of truly Chinese cultural attributes that you don't exactly feel, including in traditional Chinese medicine. Yes.
So did Deng Xiaoping or the National Academy of Sciences instantly in 1979 call out tea as a clear example of Chinese cultural asset that's intangible?
Great question. So the question is, was Deng Xiaoping so farsighted or was the National Academy of Sciences so focused that they immediately called out tea as a natural, not as a natural, as a cultural, intangible cultural attribute? And the answer is there was no direct discussion of that in 1979. But by 1980, there was a direct discussion because, again, in 1979, we're just opening the door in China. And so all these ideas are coming in. Oh, we better capture this, we better capture that. And then the conversation got raised in 1980 and then off and running. And really, realistically, what two styles of tea in the beginning drove this movement? One was yellow tea, because all of a sudden the Chinese realized, hey, how many farmers are really doing yellow tea? And do we understand what they're doing in any sort of deep way? And the answer was few farmers. Many were giving it up because of the chaos of that time. And chaos, what I mean is the economic chaos. And I don't mean this in a negative way. Really, what I mean when I say chaos is the change of system. You're going from this great big collective system into privatization. And that brings chaos and change, and in a good way and in a bad way. So the National Academy of Sciences got to work in the 80s. Let's record, let's interview old farmers who did the yellow tea process. And by the way, wherever they're doing it, let's encourage them to continue. Let's give them some subsidies of some sort, whether it's marketing subsidy, whether it's actual cash subsidy. Most of the time it was marketing assistance that was being provided. So that tea drove it. What other style of tea drove it? Premier's Choice. An odd thing happened with Premier's Choice. Premier's Choice, that's a green tea, by the way, got down to just a very small handful of farmers doing it in Anhui. The LCS component wasn't alive at that time. Wow, that's a false statement. The LCS component in the tea industry wasn't active at that time. And so there were no copies anywhere. This was it, down to these few peasants. So why pick Premier's Choice when there are other small varietals that were at risk? Because Premier's Choice on everybody's list of top 10 teas was always there. And that had been a favorite of the beloved Zhou Enlai. And so at a national level, people understood Premier's Choice, but they didn't understand the whole process. And when the National Academy of Sciences really captured it, of course, in the tea industry, they understood, but the general public didn't understand. It's a very unique process. So then China was off and running. Those two aspects, those two teas, pushed the National Academy of Sciences to get moving in that direction. And the more they moved in that direction, the more they understood, hey, there's other tea processes that we better capture. All right, now we're looking at Downey Peak, and we're probably looking thirsty also. We're starting to look thirsty. We haven't gotten real thirsty yet. Downey Peak in the midst of Qihong territory, 2,200 square miles south of the Yellow Mountains. The Downey Peak was actually in the southernmost part of the Yellow Mountains. And you know what? I better have the tea master come up, because if I get down into the details here, you will be really thirsty by the time I'm done with that. So without further ado, it is such a great pleasure to bring to the camera the COVID-free, extremely healthy tea master, Xiaobei.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, good morning. 早上好. Yeah, my name is Xiaobei. Okay, we do, the red ungreen red tea. So it's from Qimen County. Okay, we do just I take this section, this today now I use the 3 glasses. This introduce this I bought it in Japan. This is the bowl, so I bought the 2, right?
Mhm.
2,
So you'll start to see odd things like this appear. And this is a tea tool that they use in Japan, actually, as part of the transfer when they're making various Japanese tea. Now, you don't need to have one of these. You can have any tool that would replicate this. The way that Xiaobei has the tableau set up is 3 large cups. Remember, this is 170-degree, but that's not what she's doing yet. She's not pouring that. She's making sure that the glasses are completely clean, they're heated, because once you put the tea in it, you want to make sure that the first step is to get that aroma out. And so having heated glasses is very useful. And then having 3, you can cool the water much faster. So that's why she has this tableau set up. If you have just 2 glasses and you don't have any of this other stuff except for the tea strainer, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. All right, she's drawing the water that she's going to dissipate the steam. And we draw this water at 175 degrees. And then as we go through this process, we dissipate the steam, lower the heat, and that's what we use. Why, again, as a reminder, particularly for delicate tea like Downey Peaks, you flatten the flavor and particularly the aroma if you don't do this. This particular delicate tea likes less steam, a little bit lower heat. She's not in a hurry. Tea master is not in a hurry. Bit by bit by bit. So you need not be in a hurry either. All right, and she grabs her bag number 1, which some of you may notice is dated May 20th. But since last week we didn't have a tea tasting, we've set everything back a week, even though the labels had already been printed. And that's why we're doing it from the bag which says May 20th.
Okay.
For those of you who've had Vortex before, take a look. Once you're actually brewing, take a look at the difference in size of heat. It'll be very obvious to you when you do that. All right, she puts it in the cup, shake the heated cup, shakes it up. This is a 3-minute steeping. She's going to pour the water on the side, and she's going to use the pot to do that. It's easier, or the kettle, it's easier to do it because of the location of the spigot and the control of the flow to do it this way, but you don't have to. Okay, put the water in, set the timer for 3 minutes. And now we're back to the Qimen territory. We're back to traditional versus innovative in terms of how to make this tea. And there's really three basic ways of making tea, red tea, in the Qihong area. One is Gongfu red tea. One is traditional red tea, and the other is innovative. This is made in an innovative style. This actually means that there are more steps, and this was proposed in consultation with farmers by the National Academy of Sciences. And scientists, tea scientists working with farmers developed this format for doing this tea. This is actually harder than the traditional way that this is done. And so you ask yourself, because I use the word traditional, do you mean, because usually when you use the word traditional in China, you mean thousands of years old, or at least 1,000 years old. No, this tea from Qimen area, red tea process, started in 1876. So it's not thousands of years old, but when it started, it borrowed a tradition that was older than 1876. And that tradition was Fujian province. So Fujian province first started making red tea. The exact date we don't know, probably anytime from 1650 up to about 1680, somewhere in that area. And they developed the style called Gongfu Black. The person who created Qimen was versed in Gongfu Black from Fujian, and therefore created a process that was very similar to that. And really, when you look at the Gongfu style, what that means is giving individual attention to each leaf. Now, I used a shortcut to actually address this. Let me put it another way that from the Western mind will be easier to understand. So if we're in Yunnan and just making red tea, usually it's 4 steps, 5 steps. Now, we're in Qimen County and we're doing this traditional red tea. They have a total of 17 steps. So already that gives you some sense of the complexity versus red tea that's done in a non-Gongfu manner. All right, the timer went off. Tea master is separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. All right, so several things to note right away. Look at this beautiful color. Wow. More gold than red, but you have a little bit of both in there, but more gold. Let's see what these leaves smell like. By the way, when I was standing over there, I could already smell, but you know, I'm greedy. I want more. Okay. Very characteristic of Qihong teas. What do I mean by that? All great Qihong teas. So what does great refer to here? It refers to both varietal, but more importantly, the processing modality. So remembering that there are grades of Qimen or Qihong tea, and you go from premium, then first, all the way down to 10th. These years, you see something in the market called good, good bud tea. There's all sorts of crazy things which have entered the market. But really what we're talking about is premium. So this is a premium grade. And this means it goes through all the additional steps. All right, so let's enter the quality arena. And let's take a 170-degree sip. What are we aiming to do? We want to coat the tongue. You know what? I didn't finish my thought just a second ago. All the premium grades have a distinct aroma. Is the aroma the same? No, it's different and it has to do with the drying process. However, almost all of them make you think of some aspect of floralness. That was the conclusion of that thought. Now let's enter the quality review. Okay. So when we enter the quality arena, the first thing we're doing is we're trying to determine what's the mouthfeel. Where is it dry on the tongue? Is it dry on the tongue? And by age, I think this interestingly matters. And I got an illustration of this yesterday when one of our tea friends, I believe she is, oh, I don't want to get this wrong, probably 10 years old. I think I got it wrong. Close enough. And she tasted a Calif tea, and I asked her the exact question, where on the tongue is it dry? And her response is nowhere. And I'm thinking to myself, how can that be? Nowhere. But I think the taste buds develop as you age. And that's why I think that the answer was nowhere. Because I think in a few years, she's going to drink the same tea and have a different answer. So that's what we're looking for initially. Where in the mouth do you have a dryness? And for everybody, it's a little different. So don't worry if your dryness is mid-tongue and another person's dryness is upper or the roof of the mouth. All okay. But there should be some sort of dryness, because what that really is the polyphenols interacting with your taste buds. At the next part of what you're looking for is, how does it go down? What sort of aftertaste? And lastly, what sort of energetics? So energetics is very concrete and specific. Energetics is, do you feel warming? Do you feel cooling? How do you feel after you drink this tea? And it may take you a bit to really understand its effect on your body. And that's okay. This isn't a rush. It's not a competition. So I'm going to take a second sip, and then you're going to go ahead and brew this tea yourselves. And what am I doing? I'm verifying the dryness. I'm verifying the aftertaste. I'm also getting a little, I'm trying to get a little sense of what the inherent taste of this is. All these things in that second mouthful. All right, so it's your turn to brew. So it's bag number 1. Downey Peaks. It's 4 grams, 3 minutes. And while Tea Master's getting this together, one of the things to note about Downey Peak is it comes from a higher elevation than most of the other Qimen teas. So it has a different terroir. So it grows at about 4,000 feet, between 3,000 and 4,000 feet above sea level. Much of the rest of the Qimen community is about 1,800 feet to about 3,200 feet above sea level. All right, so the first thing you're doing is making sure that your cups are heated. You can use any temperature of hot water at this point. And then you're going to draw 175-degree water and dissipate the steam, cool it down. Not in a hurry, just steady tea rhythm. You're going to get bag number 1, labeled Downey Peaks. Get leaves carefully out and put them in one of the heated cups. Not quite ready yet. They're in the cup now, heated cup. You're gonna shake it, trying to get the heat distributed among the tea leaves. You smell? Did I pick up the right tea? Mhm. Get your initial smell. And you pour on the side of the cup. Trying not to hit the leaves directly, and you hit your timer. 3 minutes. It's beautiful stack of leaves at the top, some at the bottom, so you're getting the full extrusion from the bottom. And the ones at the top, don't worry about those. Don't try and force them to go in the water, because remember, you're going to get 3 great steepings from this. Well, part of the way you do that is having some of the leaves remain at the top. All right, so talking about Qihun in this particular varietal, what are the circumstances of the terroir in this area? They get between 60 and about 85 inches of rain on average a year. Temperature ranges anywhere from about 64 to about 77. Why are these things important? If you have a temperature where the average is less than, say, 55, your bud growth will be smaller and fewer. If the temperature is over 87 or so, same problem. You're going to have buds that are fewer and the yield will be lower. So this segment of terroir has on average about 50 sunny days. It has about 170 foggy days, and it has about 150 semi-cloudy days. So it's mostly foggy and cloudy. It's a relatively temperate area. The humidity is relatively high, but it's not excessive. So that's where this is coming from. And I said that there's a traditional and an innovative way. Well, everybody picks the tea, everybody withers the tea, no matter what. You then roll the tea, no exceptions to that. You oxidize it, no exceptions to that, and you dry it. So those 5 steps are exactly the same, whatever you're going to end up doing. If it's premium or grade 1, 2, or 3, you have a number of additional steps, including, you remember how small vortex is? For those of you who've had it, you knead it in the pan and you get it down to that small size. This, you do not. You don't need this in the pan. And there's a real important reason why. Because first off, you don't want that shape, that rounded shape, nor do you want the needle shape. The needle shape is the hardest because you have to knead hard. And it takes a long time, and you have a very low output every day because it's such hard work. This is in between. This isn't in a snail format. This is in actually a striped format, almost like oolong tea. Now, the reason I say almost is because these leaves aren't as large. They're picked earlier, and it's a bud and 2 leaves at most. And the leaf size is a smaller size. So the result is it's striped, but it's a smaller stripe than, for example, the Calif teas are. Very unique, So go ahead and enter the quality arena and let's see what you think. And by the way, people have this misunderstanding about red tea and true black tea. So let me clear that up. In English, the initial and other European foreign languages, the initial importers of tea looked at the color of the tea after its ocean journey and said, ah, we're going to call this black tea. They didn't speak Chinese. And so the result was they didn't understand that the Chinese were calling this red tea. Red tea indicates high oxidation. Black tea indicates fermentation. So chemical versus organic process. Yes.
Participant says the warm leaves smell of a delicate sweetness of dried fruit, as well as a creaminess like of a roasted coconut in the background.
So the wet leaves, warm leaves smell like dried fruit, creamy, and a suggestion of coconut in the background. Why do I want to focus on this particular comment? I love the fact that you led with dried fruit. The Chinese lead with dried fruit in this. In fact, what they will frequently say is an apple fragrance. Yes.
So the participant says the scent of the warm leaves for him was malt and something he couldn't name. And the steeped leaves also have this malt and a light sweetness, but the tea liquor has this honey caramel sweetness.
Tea liquor, a honey caramel sweetness, as opposed to the wet leaves, which are malty, have slight hints of caramel. It's different. And this is, again, a good call. There is a distinct difference, and you might be wondering, what is it that's creating this difference? Oh, I get to use science. Mercenol. That's a big word. I didn't even know how to spell it. Geraniol. Those two volatile compounds are increased in the process of doing this particular tea. Mercenol occurs in bay leaves, and it's rare to have it in tea leaves. And again, it's because of the process that it creates this mercenol. And that's one of the things, just in case you were wondering from a scientific point of view, that influences how you perceive this tea. Yes.
Another participant says this tea is smooth, lightly fruity, and very easy to drink.
Smooth, slightly fruity, and easy to drink. Great commentary. This is so easy to drink that you could even get an avowed tea disliker, and they would have a very hard time not liking this tea.
A participant also says he does get a sense of that appleness in the scent of the tea.
So another participant notes that there is appleness in the scent of the tea. And again, the Qihuns, all the Qihuns have some sort of scent of either apple or floralness to them. And that's, at the end of the day, these teas are on the top 10, almost everybody's top 10 list of Chinese teas. They've won numerous awards abroad. And the reason is you get these unusual, very uniform, easy to identify scents, and there's nothing about this tea that is hard to consume. There's no rough points. There's no bitterness. There's nothing which makes you pause and say, well, if only it didn't have this. then I wouldn't need milk for sure. Yes.
Somebody else comments she gets the tartness of apple out of this, and another participant says he can almost imagine a hint of cinnamon in it now.
Oh, I love these two comments. The first commentator gets a sense of apple tartness. And I love that because you're right. This is closer to a green apple than it is to a Fuji. And by making that distinction, it's really clear in my head that you're getting the same scent that I'm getting. And then the second comment was, I've already
Almost like a hint of cinnamon.
hint of cinnamon. I like that too, because rather than call out cinnamon, what I'd say is that there's a hint of spiciness. I understand the cinnamon, by the way, and I'm not critical of that at all. In fact, I think that's a good comment, but I would generalize it more, because I think if you say a slight hint of spiciness, more people will get it. A slight hint of cinnamon sometimes drives people into a very specific taste rather than a generalized taste. Both great comments, yes.
Same participant has another interesting observation. He says maybe this can be part of a new class of red tea that is a tea in hot apple cider clothing. So he's getting hot apple cider out of it.
I love it. Hot apple cider as a comparison against how to understand this tea. And I think that that is a really fair comparison. It's not the same, but it has all of those hints that direct you to think, well, what is this reminding me of? It reminds me of hot apple cider. And particularly, you know, some ciders are so spiced that they lead with spice. But some ciders are so apple and less spice that they lead with apple. And those are the hot apple ciders I'm really envisioning, the ones that lead with apple, because for me, this is all about the apple. And again, going back to the tart comment, it's closer to the tart apples for me than it is to those really blossoming sweet apples.
Oh, wait, comment, sorry. Could you later speak, please, about the photos you sent, particularly the one with the different trays showing different colors of tea leaves? Are these different colors showing the steps from the leaves on the bush through the processing of to the finished red tea?
Great question. So the photos we sent, the one with the individual in it who has several trays of different colored teas. The question is this steps of the processing? And I wish it were. It is not. It's actual different teas that all come from the Qihong area. So what he was showing us was these are all things, all products, tea products that come from the Qihong area. All right, let's see how I'm doing. Oops, I'm not wearing it today. So, okay, we're doing just fine. So, innovative versus traditional, more steps. What's creating this fruitiness? Particularly, they go through two very fine drying steps. And part of what they are doing is they re-wet the leaves slightly. So remember, I took you through the first 5 steps. Everybody does that from from least good quality Qihong all the way to the top. But what does the top do? It does additional steps. So in the Gongfu tea, it breaks up the leaves and then sieves them down to a certain size, dries them yet again, wets them, dries them, piles them for a slight bit more additional oxidation, redries, and that's traditional. That's Gongfu tea. Traditional does not break up the tea leaves. So that's the big difference between traditional versus Gongfu. But it does go through one additional drying step, several wetting steps. And by wetting, they're not dumping water on there. They're misting a little spray on there. And then the innovative actually goes through 2 additional drying steps. And why did they focus on these additional drying steps? Was it just convenient? Was it fun? Maybe it was fun to do this and they were just having fun. The answer is no to both of those. It was really about taste because they found that they could manipulate and strengthen the aroma if they went through these steps. And even though this was more costly, it took longer, the tea drinking public, they don't care. They want this good flavor. And that's why there's a market in China. So one of the things, and I'll get to the question in 1 minute, one of the things that may surprise you, and certainly surprised me when I was reviewing the literature this week, I actually thought that 80% of red tea made in China was exported and 20% was consumed in China. So in the Qihong market, this is not true at all. 20% is exported, 80% is consumed domestically. I was really surprised by that figure because for whatever reason, I got in my head it was another number. Yes.
Participant says she's getting mouthfeel and energetics now. Mouthfeel is expansive and fat, and the energetics calming.
Energetics of this tea for this particular participant are calming. Absolutely. This is a calming tea. It has that effect on me, calming and warming for me. And then this particular commentator also noted expansive, fat flavor, and expensive flavor, all in the same mouthful. And that's a good catch. This is easy to drink. It fills the mouth. It's uniform. It's got that slight tartness. It's got a fruitiness, a hint of caramel in the smell, a little hint of spiciness. It is just out of this world good. Yes.
Participant says it's a good tea for treaty negotiations. The other side will seek less favorable terms to get more access to this tea.
Now, this is a really good comment because it shows Americans are at a disadvantage because they're not growing any good tea here. I know somebody's going to argue with me, but that's okay. Any good tea is in comparison to the great teas from China. That's what I'm really referring to. And so the commentator says, hey, for those who use this tea as part of their negotiation, they're really going to have a huge advantage because once you drink this tea, your demands for other things like territory or whatever may decline, and instead you'll replace it with demands for this tea.
I like that strategy.
I love that strategy.
Another participant says the infused leaves are giving off another underlying aroma she can't quite identify. Something maybe earthy or wet soil, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have thoughts on that. So there's another underlying aroma that this participant is identifying but can't put a direct name to. Let's go back to the maltiness, because I think of that semi-undefined as a maltiness. The other thing that some Chinese commentators would note about this is just the barest hint of floralness. And which floral am I thinking? I'm thinking of orchids. Yes, orchids.
Another participant says she gets a happy belly feeling from the tea.
Happy belly feeling. And why not? It's warming and again calming. And by the way, in general, as a reminder, red teas, when you're having a stomach issue, stomach upset, they're really, really good at changing how you feel.
Another participant says immediately first step, for the first sip, the tea felt healing and nourishing for her.
Another participant talks about healing and nurturing and reminding you that
Nourishing. sorry.
nourishing, reminding you that all of these teas play different roles within our bodies, and our bodies need various things. And so, particularly for red tea, if you're having stomach issues, you're having intestinal issues, again, this seems to help. And there is a lot of research, but it's still not defined enough for me to say, well, this cures this or this ameliorates that. But there is a lot of focus on the stomach and the microbiome, the influence, particularly of red tea, on that. All right, I think that, whoops, through that motion so many times and I forgot I'm not wearing anything today. Really, really glad to be back with everybody. So part of what I can conclusively say to you is if you haven't had COVID, you're not missing anything. So don't go out there and think, well, I better try COVID since everybody else has had it. No, wrong thinking. It's fun to discuss these teas with you, particularly this one. This one, we were so excited to get a chance to talk to you about this because it really typifies at the highest level what red tea, particularly the multi-stepped red tea can be, the highly refined and crafted red tea can be. And in the West, we're so used to not tasting it without additives. And we're not used to getting this level of red tea. So that's why we were really excited to share this with you. Hope that you all have a very, very great week. Next week, intuition is the tea that we will discuss, another red tea. All right. Thanks for all your commentary today. It was great. Your observations were spot on. We'll see you next week. You take care now. Bye-bye.